Okay, I know we just did a series of 3 videos containing information, making all kinds of connections, and even in fact revealing who elves and brownies, pixies, fairies were. If you look at some of these pictures here, you probably realize who's supposed to be who. It might be a little confusing. You think the one on the left is a fairy. How big are fairies? Well, they only know about this big, right? Or is that the pixie? Kind of confusing. If she had a green dress on like the elf on the right, then that would look more like Tinkerbell and more fit with the idea of Tinkerbell, right? So even in their guise and what they have with them, different things shows different ones. For the one in the middle, looks much more fierce of a person here going on, and she'd be the type of person that would have tattoos, like Pictish people. And so you might call it a pixie or a faun. But we can't do that because that's almost too telling. And we still call people deer today for a reason. But doe is a female deer, and ray is a drop of golden sun. If we look at her accoutrements on there, somebody just playing around doing this, they gave her a lion's belt with a sun symbol directly below it. She has some fabric on her that looks like snake skin would come about or something, but something like a cinched up cummerbund type, stitched up like a boot mainly. These tops, which is familiar, not seen so much necessarily in the fairy, but in the elf, definitely evident. She's also the one who would have a weapon and so on, and you say, well, they had horns, as the goat people and stuff, and they had horns, right? Well, if you look on her waist, she's got a horn. Sometimes these things are easy to see somewhat how they brought about the mythology and where you get it from. And it even, if you look into it, oddly, it seems to connect to a point that you'd say, well, oh, they kind of kept like who is who with this whole mythology and everything else, and really it was about themselves. Would it surprise you if all 3 of these were the same people? It's amazing what makeup can do. Would it surprise you that this could be the same 3 people? Elves known with their braiding over here on the right, sacred staves, wizards and warlocks could have anything to do with the other magical creatures of the land that people don't know, and sacred forests. An elf would have much more greenery, things like that. Definitely a Mother Nature concept going on, where these others are said to have been creatures of the forest. That gives a connotation to where kind of things went off of it. But people that used to believe in the god El can become elves very easily. Pix become pixies. Tuatha De Danann and the fairies. And these goat people and the satyrs that people talk about can actually be pretty much one and the same people. Not directly, but indirectly. And when we did that thing with Robert Sepper here not too long ago, it comes out the end of it, and he goes, let me conclude with blah, blah, blah. And so whenever he did so, I stopped it. But he has more to say, and believe it or not, there's a part 2. So we're going to continue on with this, and it deals with some more things and some stuff that I really is not in my field of research so much. Just like when he talks about a more modern time I quite often tell you I don't want to go there. It gets too personal. So let's look at something that was a statement in a book, and we'll go from there, of what was said in a book about ring lords and fairies and people of myth.
Quote, the Tuatha De Danann were the Black Sea princes of Scythia. Like the original dynastic pharaohs, they traced their descent from the great pendragons of Mesopotamia. From them sprang the kingly lines of the Irish, Brutni, and the Picts of Scotland, Caledonia. In Wales, they founded the royal house of Gwynedd, while in Cornwall, in the southwest of England, they were the sacred gentry known as Picts. So, from a single cast of the original blood royal, whether known as the Sangreal, the Albigens, or the Ring Lords, we discover many of the descriptive terms which sit at the very heart of popular folklore. For here, in this one noble race, we have the elves, fairies, and pixies, not beguiling little folk, but distinguished kings and queens of the dragon succession. So in closing, I'll remind my subscribers that regardless of any post-World War II propaganda, including films by Steven Spielberg and other Hollywood moguls who are not historians or anthropologists, but globalists with a political agenda, the swastika symbol and star known as the Seal of Solomon or David are found side by side in antiquity.
And you can see that in mosaics, and this is nowhere in any way, shape, or form the only one. He's about to show you a few more. We've shown a few in the other video about in Lalibela and a lot of places. And it's kind of that old fairy tale of wherever Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. But certain things are taken as being not together. Well, we look at the two sides of a coin that were right before World War II, and definitely they sure were on the other sides of the coin of each other for some reason at that point, and now show in somehow opposition. What's not shown in this picture here is right out the bottom of this is a symbol that's in that Led Zeppelin album too, but it's also a symbol that contains the Vesca Pisces. But you can see this a few other places, and a lot of them that all make connections to ancient people, such as the Phoenicians,
Such as the archaeological ruins of the Temple of Jupiter in the Phoenician city of Baalbek, which incidentally, Japheth is where we get the modern English spelling for Jupiter, who in Christianity is Saint Peter, the serpent culture stretching from Ireland to India and even deeper into the Far East, Asia, and Japan. But that'll be left for another time when I tie this in with ancient Aryan presence in the New World, which is not really new at all, and whose entire history, as taught in modern academia, has been corrupted and falsified, as America was not named after Amerigo Vespucci, but after America, an Incan word which is literally translated into land of the plumed serpent, another way of saying winged serpent, a symbol etched into the ancient stone of Egypt and Mesopotamia. Thank you for listening. My name is Robert Sepper. I'm an anthropologist. My published work is available on Amazon. My books make a great gift. If you'd like to support my work, you can do that through patreon.com. There should be a link in the description section for those who are interested.
and he has a general closing like that, and I wanted to leave that in there because I am utilizing Robert's work and very much respected him so. So we've just made quite a few connections there, and the reality of even the naming of America itself and how things come out. But we're these winged serpent type dragon type creatures, and its variation on a theme. And so we've talked about variations on a theme and different scales of music and things, and somehow in correlation you have this same situation all the way through Persia and India, all the way up into Tarim Basin in China, and the people that used to live in that area that nobody talks about and knows about, that carried forth about this dragon concept that you can see in Sumeria with the Tiamat concepts all the way through and through each of these people in their own separate ways. Now, he's going to go to a second part here, and we are too, for we're only 10 minutes into it. So let's take a look at that. in just a moment. So he studied anthropology and got into writing the books to reveal things that he found. Kind of inspires me to want to write my book again, even though it got fried on my hard drive back whenever a lot of my work did. But that may be what helped push me into doing these themselves, though. So now let's go into part 2 of this here, and it's going to try to commercialize it. That just sucks it. In a bit of a suit today. Somebody in the comments said they wanted to do a whole series where it's just literally Robert in his suit taking his walks with his dog he used to have, or perhaps all that, just that and the music, and that makes somewhat sense. Let's see if I can get this to close to the same time. I think I'm still starting in mid part of him talking, or at least doing his opening, but we'll catch in real quick. I'm only happy when it rains.
It looks like it might rain today, so I'm just gonna feed my friends here and cut this intro short. Today's episode will be a continuation on the theme about the Scythians, their ancient origins, and the influence of their lineage on history, which continues until this day.
How about that? Oh, it's a part 2. Let's get on with it, but hold on, the birds.
The Merovingian dynasty was the ruling family of the Franks from the middle of the 5th century until 751. Their royal bloodline emerging as the King of the Franks, a group of Germanic people whose name was first mentioned in 3rd century Roman sources, but along with other Germanic tribes that I mentioned in my last video, stem from Scythians or Aryans that penetrated into Europe from Anatolia.
So we can look at these different list of names they have, and it's the history of France. It's where Franks comes from. People can get that, but other names come out in this too. If you look through the whole list, like Clovis. Clovis. I know that is a people that had a certain blade of the Americas that got died off. Why would they use that name? That's odd. But these group of Germanic kings that ran through this time and set forth a standard that started out, that led through to a modern day.
If you haven't seen it yet, I'll leave a link in the description. It's called History of the Royal Dragon Bloodline, and their ancient symbol was the dragon, which comes down to us in legends of invading dragons in European mythology.
Well, and that's 1 through 3 of the videos that we already watched as part 1, and it came just before this. But so there are already links going back to it, and I welcome you if you haven't seen those parts yet. Go back through them. There's far too many connections for me to even begin to start to make. But let's just work at the etymology of the word dragon itself as one starter, I guess, will help us.
When we look up the etymology of the word dragon, we find that it says, from Old French dragon, and directly from Latin draconum, or draco, meaning huge serpent, and from Greek drakon, meaning serpent, giant sea fish. But then it also says it stems from Durkishtai, to see clearly, and from Proto-Indo-European dirk, to see. In Sanskrit, visible. In Old Irish, I have seen. Old English and Old High German, light, clear, and Albanian, which linguistically is very close to the original Proto-Indo-European and means light. Then it goes on to say, perhaps in the literal sense, it's the one with the deadly glance. That's interesting, and conjures up the ancient symbol that is most commonly referred to as the evil eye.
And you see this all over the place, but really it's something that started out in the Mediterranean and through there. And this was actually a warding god in a way, because the blue-eyed gods are looking upon you and seeing what's going on at the time. And so you don't want to do this right in the face or in the eye of God. And this one-eyed type of God situation goes on too and connects all with this also. But let's just continue. For in these little designs right here, it almost looks like Christmas ornaments, doesn't it? It almost looks like little Christmas tea gingerbread dresses, Christmas bells, butterflies that we've been talking about that go with these fairies. For if they're only this big, they have the wings, and you've seen that, so they deify them in that situation. And so is the Danites, the tribe of Dan, for Danite is the separate family that are for monarch butterflies. Isn't it crazy how all these things go together?
Which is famous all over the Mediterranean since ancient times, spanning much of what has once been the Phoenician Empire, colonies, and trade routes.
Seahorse.
In Hebrew, dragon translates to Tannin, a great sea monster, which brings us back to the Merovingians, whose name is said to derive from Merovi, king of the Franks.
Well, before we do, let's just brush back on that Tanit. For he shows you a picture there that looks like somewhat like a seahorse, and yet it looks somewhat like the water horse of that ancient movie where the kid gets the dragon and the thing that's kind of like Loch Ness. And so now we make another connection on this situation, and no, it's real. I've seen it. Right? But in that, we make a connection to Leviathan. And one would wonder why these people that we talk about that are supposed to be trapped in the center of Asia would have anything to do with boats. But if you look at the Black Sea, it suddenly became connected to everywhere else. But it looks like they were getting around in these boats long before that. When you look at the shield that's on this book, it's an ancient cast that's here. I believe that's just a cask. You can see that there's those Merovingians there going, and I think, well, damn, that looks very Viking-ish. Looks a little Phoenician boat there. Well, Sumerians had the god, and in fact, in their very startings of origins, there's Apsu, and the concept that happens, it gets reiterated through the time that story's been carried on with Marduk. And this story just keeps getting reborn and reborn in many different ways. We end up at the time that ends up with a variation on a theme. There's cows over here in the little corners. Sun symbols. All kinds of things that people just don't really take note of. But Merovingians. Now we're getting out of my realm. This is in that Da Vinci Code books and things like that in the range. And I looked into some of it there, and I found a few faltering points and people having to make a little too much of a reach for what they were saying. But it did have connections to what I had talked about. But then all of a sudden it got real personal. Now I'm just going to let this go.
According to the legend, Merovi had two fathers, King Clodion and a strange beast of the sea. The druidic title of Pendragon, which means High Dragon, or King of Kings, was passed on to the Merovingian kings in 666 AD. In Bloodline of the Holy Grail, Lawrence Gardner says, quote, despite the carefully listed genealogies of his time, The heritage of Meravios was strangely obscured in the monastic annals. Although the rightful son of Clodion, he was nonetheless said by historians Priscus to have been sired by an arcane sea creature, the Bisti Neptunus. The Cimbrian
This has something to do with Neptune, but I don't want to ruin it and get in the middle of it. Let's just let it go.
Franks, from whose female line the Merovingians emerged, were associated with the Grecian Arcadia before migrating to the Rhineland. As we have seen, they call themselves the Numage, people of the New Covenant,